whether you are a student, a faculty member, community member, families or friends, we are just so happy that you found the time to join us tonight, because we again know this is going to be such a treat for you and for our community. So, you know, we aren't here to hear us talk. We're here to hear Miss Nikki Giovanni talk. So we promised that we would keep our introductions to a minimum, and that's what we're going to do. So Miss Nikki Giovanni, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand it off to, I guess, John Holloway.
Oh, okay.
Good evening.
Hi, John.
I believe it appropriate that before we begin tonight's program, we should have a brief moment of silence to observe the 8 victims whose lives were taken from them, 7 of whom were Asian American women in the Atlanta area. While I believe investigators have not yet identified a motive, what we do know is 8 people were killed, and 7 of them are Asian American women. This looks like a hate crime of Asian Americans and women. This must stop. If we can just have a moment of silence. Thank you. Welcome to all our students, staff, faculty, trustees, community members, and friends of the college. Warm greetings to our friends at Southwest Virginia Community College. I sincerely hope this is only the beginning of partnership opportunities between our 2 institutions. I believe I speak on behalf of our planning committees. It has truly been enjoyable to work with folks from Southwest. On behalf of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I count it a privilege to be in a number of truly amazing people I work with on a daily basis, the DEI team, Reverend Bowers and Carly Blaylock. You are amazing, along with members from our planning teams and several different campus partners. I thank you. Tonight is our keynote presentation in celebration of Women's History Month. The campus-wide planning committee has worked to offer a dynamic set of programs to honor and recognize the many contributions women have made throughout the world. Tonight, we are also in for a treat. We have one of the country's most celebrated poets joining us this evening, Nikki Giovanni, or should I say, the legendary Nikki Giovanni, poet, writer, activist, lecturer, and I can go on and on. She will be speaking on I Am She, Sheros, poetry, and feminine power. So I hope you came, like me, with tiptoed anticipation for a dynamic, engaging talk from the distinguished poet, Nikki Giovanni. Thank you.
Well, I'm supposed to introduce Miss Giovanni, and it seems like VP Holloway has kind of already done that. So we're all excited about having her here, and I would just say you can read about her anywhere. If you Google Nikki Giovanni, you're going to get a plethora of information. But Miss Giovanni is currently a professor teaching writing and literature at Virginia Tech University, just right up the road from us. She is born in Knoxville, Tennessee. So she is an Appalachian woman, and all kinds of accolades have been given to her, just numerous honors. If you name it, she's been given that. And she takes a lot of pride. I read this in just being a Black American, a daughter, a mother, we heard she takes a lot of pride in being a grandmother and an English professor. So her work speaks to all ages, and she's traveled around the world bringing unspeakable joy to so many people, everybody that she comes in contact with. I had the awesome privilege of meeting her face to face. So if any of you all saw my Facebook, you saw Nikki Giovanni and Sharon Bowers together like old school. You saw that today if you saw my Facebook, but I'm honored to have been in her presence in Radford, Virginia, and in Pulaski, Virginia, where she did not think it robbery to come to our little place and share her great joy with us. So without saying anything else, I want you to go Google, look, find out about her. She'll speak for herself tonight. And we're honored to have her here for Women's History Month. And I'll be real honest, one of my friends is on here, Augusta Leslie, and we both, Nikki Giovanni has been our Sheros since before college. So we have both performed ego tripping, and we're always anywhere that Nikki Giovanni is, we try to be there. So without any further ado, I'm sure some of you are going to join me in giving a great big Zoom, 2 thumbs, 2 snap, welcome to Miss Nikki Giovanni. Miss Giovanni. What happened? It's you.
Well, oh, it's me?
It's you.
I saw Martha Lee. I am so, you know, I'm the only person at Virginia Tech that doesn't email. And it drives the president, it drives the president crazy. Hi, Tommy, and hi, John. It's so good to see you again, and it's so good to see you again. And John, thank you for that moment of silence. What is happening in our Asian community is what used to happen in the Black community. Only, of course, in the Black community, we were lynched. Somebody had you had to look at every tree, and now we're looking at older people, and they all seem to be older people, don't they, that we're just shooting down. And today somebody said, as you did, and that's not my speech today, I just want to mention that we don't know the motive. We do know the motive. The motive is hate, and the motive is fear. That's not hard to figure out. And what he's trying to do already is figure out, how do I get out of what I have done? I've killed 8 women. I've killed 7 women, excuse me, and 1 other. How do I get out of it? And I'm sorry, but we are better. I know that other people, much brighter than I am, have pointed out America is maybe not that much better, but I have to think that we are better. After, 400 years of being in America, my ancestors were brought here essentially against our will. And I say essentially because there were wars, and the wars that were fought in Africa, we were part of the people who ended up here, were a part of the people who were losing, and they were captured and they were sold to the Europeans, because we have to remember, and it is something to remember. The Europeans did not start slavery, they joined it. And even now, slavery continues. Only now pretty much it's a sex trade, but slavery continues. And we have to remember that. So we had a group who captured us and sold us, and another group who purchased us and brought us to America. And then another group that split us up and sent us around and did whatever they want to do. But we were not the only ones. Nobody mentions what happened to what we call Native Americans, who were not American because it wasn't America then. Nobody mentions what it must have been like to be on the Cherokee Trail, and the blanket that they gave you to keep warm because you were cold and it was wet and the snow was going to come down as you go further and further west. That blanket was covered with smallpox disease, and you died on that road. And we seem to want to forget, for all of those evil people, it's not hatred, it's evil, who want to go and shoot old Japanese men and women, who want to beat them up, who want to knock them down in their driveways. We seem to forget that these people were put in concentration camps. How could we who are Black forget that slavery and concentration camps have a lot in common? And how could we forget that we had friends who, like Tommy Wright, who were fighting to say, no, this is wrong. We may not always have had the numbers that we needed, but we always fought to say this is wrong. And we ended up with the civil right, with the civil movement, civil war. And one of the things that I love about being, Tom, and you're right about that, I love being an Appalachian. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we have to remember that if the Appalachian people had not stood up for America, and those are going to be white people and Black people, but if they had not stood up for America, we could not have won the Civil War. One of the great movements in history was when Virginia pulled away, when they split from Virginia to now is what is called West Virginia, was going to be called Canada. But they split and said, the West Virginians said, we will not send our sons to die so that the Shenandoah can have slaves. And that was a very important movement because it kept Virginia from going from Atlanta to the Ohio River. And that split is going to be why we could win the civil war. And it becomes very important that we remember the courage that every time, and let me just be clear about that one, every time America needs somebody to be courageous, to do something that has never been done, they call upon the white boys in Appalachia. When we wanted to put somebody on, it's the truth, when we wanted to put somebody into space where they'd never been before, who do we call on? We called on John Glenn. And we asked John Glenn, an Appalachian boy, grows up on a farm, grows up all alone, nobody to talk to. But we said to John Glenn, we need somebody to go into space. Are you afraid? And John said, I can go, but what do, and it's so wonderful, what do the three Black women, what do they have to say? Because we had Black women doing what we used to have now, and a computer doing. But John called them, as you know, for those of you who know your history, called them the girls. And he was sitting there looking at a rocket that was going to take him into space and maybe not bring him back. He didn't know that. So his question, what did the girls say? And those Black women said, son, you can come back. We have checked our numbers. You will come back. And it's a wonderful thing to be a Black woman and for somebody to do something that they've never done before. To say, I'm going into space. I am not afraid. John was not afraid of going any place. He wasn't afraid of sitting next. If John Glenn had been on the bus on December 1st, 1955, we wouldn't have had a civil rights movement because John would have sat down next to Rosa Parks because she's not afraid to sit down next to a Black woman. If white men would quit being afraid of sitting down next to Black people, if they would quit being afraid of sitting down next to Asian Americans, next to anybody, next to people they elected to the government, if they had not been afraid on January the 6th, we would not have had that problem. And I think it's time we called it what it is because as Aretha Franklin, where she here would say, let's call this song exactly what it is. It is fear. They are afraid, and they need to be strong white men like Tommy. They need to be strong men like John. They need to be strong men like our president, Biden. They can't be afraid like that former fool. They have to take us forward. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to see people say, I am going to stand up for what is right. I am going to stand up for what is good. And in case you wondered, though you didn't, I am so upset with Meghan Markle that they didn't know what color my son was going to be. Well, Meghan, in case you haven't looked, your mama is a Black woman, just in case you hadn't noticed. And your father is a white man from South Africa. And we who know apartheid, we who know segregation, we know that if we went to that DNA, we're going to find an awful lot of Black blood. Maybe that little chocolate drop would have been a little chocolate drop. The answer to it is not, I was going to kill myself. The answer is, that's my baby. And we who are mothers, and there are many of us, we who are fathers, Harry should have been defending, whatever it is, it's mine. And we in the Black community have taught everybody, whatever it is, it's yours and you have to love it. It's time that we got over that thing called race and what is going to be what color, because whatever color it is, it's yours. And I say frequently because it's nonetheless true. When we go more into space, I'm a space freak, as we spend more and more time in Mars, as we go toward Jupiter, it's going to be a while because it takes about 20 years. But as we begin to spend more and more time, somebody said to me, Nikki, aren't you afraid if you're out there in space, somebody some alien might do you some harm? I said, no, baby, I live with aliens. I've lived with aliens all my life. Why should I be afraid of something else? And if some alien raped me, and if I found myself expecting an alien baby, I would not be any different from any of my other ancestors. I would have it, I would name it, and I would love it. Because that's what we do with babies. We don't sit around and cry and say, oh, I was concerned. Somebody was thinking my baby's gonna be dark. You're gonna have another little chocolate drop. What are you gonna do if it's brown? You're gonna throw it away? What are you gonna do? Go out into the national forest and put it in a garbage can? We recently had that done, didn't we? What are you gonna do? You have to get over that. And who do you think you are, and why do you think that's important? You tell me that. You and Harry had that baby, whichever baby it is. I don't know, you means nothing, but you had it. Is that why Harry stood in the hospital room to make sure that what came out was what was put in? Because that was a terrible thing for him just standing there watching. And he says, oh, it's hard to have a baby. Well, any woman on earth could have told him that. He could have walked down any street and said, excuse me, ma'am, is it difficult to have a baby? You say, yeah. And with any luck, you had fun getting it. But now you're going to have to pay because nothing's free. Nothing is free. And it's time we dealt with that. And whatever the baby is, it's ours. Whatever is on this earth, it's ours. And it's time we started to teach our youngsters that what they are is earthlings. We in the Black community, 200, 300 years ago, taught our children because they were going to be sold. They were going to be taken from us as if we were cattle, as if we were pigs, as if we were chickens, and sold. And as that child left us, though we know, in fact, that child could not remember the sound of our voice, we whispered to it, if anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're a child of God. We wanted that child to know. And as we have gone forward, we are now needing to say to our youngsters, if anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're an earthling. This is the earth that you live on. And I really like Superman because he had a job. He had other things to do, but he had a job. The Joker didn't have a job. That's why he sat around all day making trouble, making evilness. And I think that somebody like our former president ought to get a real job so that he doesn't sit around. He doesn't have all day long to sit around and pass lies. I think that it's time that you and I took back our earth, took back the goodness that is in us. Somebody asked, why did you name your latest book, which I did, called Make Me Rain? And I said, because if I couldn't be a woman, and I'm glad to be a Black woman, but if I couldn't be a Black woman, I would want to be rain, because rain keeps changing. Rain is what allows things to grow. And when the rain is tired, when the rain is no longer able to rain, it turns into ice. It turns into a snow. It turns into something else to help the earth grow, to help some seeds that somebody would call those seeds. And I'm not against, don't misunderstand, I'm not against Walt Whitman, but Leaves of Grass was not our first. Walt Whitman was not our first poet. Those women, those Black women cooking, cleaning, those Black women in the field, they were our first poets because they sang the songs that told each other, not that this is a terrible thing. Listen to those spirituals. They told each other that we are here and we will be your friends. We will be there for each other. I would like to be rain because I would hit the earth. And somebody would say, oh, that's a weed, cut it. Because somebody did. Somebody looked at Black Americans and said, they're just weeds. We don't need them. Cut them down. Get rid of them. Spray something on them. But you and I knew that we were flowers. And you and I knew that no matter how many times they cut us down, we were going to grow because the wind was going to come and help us. We were going to continue to grow, and we were going to spread love. I love the spirituals because when you look at all of the spirituals, and we have about 1,000 spirituals that we can identify, and not a one of them seeks vengeance. Not a one of them speaks of hate. They all speak of love. They all speak of being glad that Jesus is with us. They all speak of glad that we are not alone, that no matter what it is well with my soul. They speak of a comfort that they give each other. So you don't have any songs that say, I'm gonna kill myself because I'm not sure what my baby's gonna look like. Because we had Black friends that knew whatever the baby looked like, we were gonna love it. Whatever the baby did, whether it had a leg missing, whether it was something wrong with his brain. We have children that are troubled. We have children who have diseases. But not one of our friends says, ooh, that got that disease, baby, you ought to get rid of it. We all love it, no matter what it is. We say, oh, look at that little precious baby. We love it. And you who are teaching, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. Teaching is almost a sacred calling. As you're putting universities together, you who are teaching and helping those people to grow, look at what you're doing. You're spreading the goodness that you know. You're spreading the life that you know. It's a wonderful thing. And I'm not against, by the way, particularly Booker T. Washington. I think that he meant well. But Booker T. would always tell the men, didn't he, John? Always tell the men, y'all got to get out and work so that the women can go to school. That's what he did. He told you got to get a skill so that the women can go to school. That's what happened. But the men did that. And I get tired of people acting like Black men are crazy. They worked very hard to send their sisters to school. And we have to remember, and I mentioned Booker T because it's true. We have to remember that Booker T sent his daughters to Fisk. He sent his daughters to a liberal arts education. He told his sons to go work, but he wanted his daughters to go teach. And so we have to admire the sons that said, for today, I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to sacrifice for my sisters. We have to admire, and I'm not a big fan of war, that every time this country has gone to war, every time somebody has said, we're going to take this democracy away from us, our sons have joined with the sons of our friends and said, no, we're going to save this country, and we're saving it now. And I'm so proud to be a part of that community. I'm so proud that we have friends that continue to work with us, that they allow us to work with them, that we are a part of togetherness. I think it's so wonderful that we have so much to give. And giving can be difficult, but the most difficult of all of it is what you take. But it's what you take. It's very hard. It's very hard. You can give, you can fall in love, you can give. You can make money, you can give. But it's letting somebody give to you. It's that taking that is so important, and it's how you take it. It's when you show up and somebody says, this is for you, and you find a way to say thank you. You don't have to say, oh no, it doesn't matter. You have to say, none of that. You find a way to say thank you. It's so important that we all keep in mind that there is a way to say thank you. We hear, as I'm speaking to you, as I'm trying to, at universities, some of you who have students who are not sure they wanted to go to school, they're pouting about, I don't want to go to school, it doesn't mean nothing to me. You don't go to school for yourself, and somebody needs to remind you of that. You go to school for those gentlemen who 300 years ago were out in the field, and they didn't have shoes on their feet. If you go and look at the few pictures we have of the slaves, they're barefooted. We know that those women who were out there in the fields, they didn't have a mirror to look at. How do I look in the morning? They never saw themselves. We don't remember that the slaves never saw themselves. It was a long time before they had a mirror to know what they looked like. You go to school and you graduate because those people are sitting up in heaven and they're saying, look at my baby. They went to school. They graduated. They are sitting there in their rocking chair, usually with a corncob pipe. And they're saying, look at what my baby did. My baby can read and write. My baby has a degree. That's who you go for. You don't have to worry about, is it for you? Because it's not. It's for those people who sacrificed that one day you would walk down an aisle and you would collect a certificate. And that certificate doesn't say that you're smart, because you probably aren't. We know that. It doesn't say that you're wonderful, because you probably aren't. It says that you know that those people sitting up in heaven wanted you to do this. They sacrificed for you. And you now have to pay them back by staying in school and getting that certificate so that they can say, that's my baby. They can sit there and talk to each other. I know that people like me, because I'm not a nice person, I'm not going to go to heaven. I'm hoping I can get a half, maybe a day pass so that I can go up. I'd love to hear what they say in heaven, because I know that they're sitting up there and they're bragging. My baby's smarter than your baby, because that's what people do. That is exactly what people do. But that's what's so wonderful. I'd love to know, what is the conversation on graduation day for you in heaven, when people see their great grandbabies, when they are so proud, and that's why you do it. We all sacrifice something for somebody. We cannot be selfish, because people have come all the way through all of this time, and they were not selfish people. They worked hard so that you could have something different, so that you could have something better. We have a song that I love so much. It says, we are climbing Jacob's ladder. Every round goes higher and higher. It's a wonderful thing as we celebrate we don't celebrate Black history, Black women's, but we will one day, I guess. But as we celebrate Women's History Month, 3 of the people we have to remember are the women who created Black Lives Matter. And my generation, of course, we did civil rights. We got rid of segregation, and that's good for us. We made a world that this generation is now growing up in a non-segregated world, but that doesn't mean it's not racist. But the 3 women who said, it's a simple statement, Black Lives Matter. And they said, oh, somebody said Blue Lives Matter, but we never did say. We never said white lives didn't matter. We never said blue lives didn't matter. We never said anybody else's life didn't matter. We just said Black Lives Matter. And those 3 women made a global organization. I've been always so amazed, and it's been wonderful. When we had the terrible murder of George Floyd, we've had many, many murders, but the murder of George Floyd, and to see people all over the globe marching with us, to see people in Perth, Australia, marching with us to say this is wrong. What a wonderful thing that those young women started. And something else will be started yet again. I appreciate very much you allowing me to share some time with you. We are neighbors. We are brothers and sisters right up and down this aisle. We do know each other. Our universities do know each other. And more, we're coming closer and closer, because we know that what we have is a universe that celebrates all of us. And it's important to do that. We in Appalachia are some of the greatest people in America. And this is part of the history that gets neglected, that is deliberately, it's deliberately taken from us, because we are trying to make Appalachians think it's more important to be white than to be good. But Appalachians are good people, and they need to know their history. We need to know our history. We need to know that when the slaves were escaping slavery, where did they go? They followed the Appalachian Trail. And who helped that? The women who put the quilts out, the men who hung the lanterns out. Appalachia is so important that everybody wants us to not pay any attention. There's still a joke, which I think is disgraceful, in the paper, Snuffy Smith. I don't know if you read the comics. I do, because that's about all that's worth reading in there. It's Snuffy Smith. He's married to a woman called Louisa. They have a grandson called Jughead, and they've got the sheriff. And all of them do foolish, dumb things, because that's the only group left that we laugh at. That's the only group left that we can put down. And it's not right, because there's a great history in Appalachia. And it is the history of America and the history of what the Appalachians have done, not only for the Civil War, not only in that period, but I'll say it again. Every time America needs somebody brave to do something, they call a white guy from Appalachia. They don't call city boys. They don't call boys who went to Yale. They call ordinary boys. And our ordinary boys said, yeah, I'll go into space. Yeah, I'll go to the moon. Yeah, I'll sit on the space station. And we need to learn to celebrate that and where they came from. These are not cowardly, dumb people. These are great people. They didn't go to Harvard. They didn't go to Brown. Some cases, they graduated from high school and joined the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. These are great people, and we need to celebrate them. And we who are Black have helped them go forward. We help them take steps forward. We help them be safe. We help them to know, oh, you can do space. If we can do slavery, you can do space. And gave them the courage to go forward. It's a great thing, by the way, to be a Black woman. I'm going to recommend that. And it's a great thing, I am. It's a great thing to be old. We forget that too, because we live in a country that everybody's supposed to be thin and young. And I can't think of anything dumber. You will be so happy, so happy when your children are finally graduating from college. You'll be so happy because then your house will be paid for, the car will be paid for, your dog will have his shots. You will be so happy. You say, now I can grow old and I can sit on the porch and I can listen to see if some of those people in heaven are saying something to me. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share some of my thoughts with you. I'm just a poet. All I have are words. So words are all I have to give. But many of us who are listening, you have something to give. Something maybe else, something maybe different, some other talent. These are not things I know, but I know you should listen to yourself. I know that when you pile up in bed and you have a dream about your grandmother, your great-grandmother, you need to listen to what she's telling you. You have a dream about your grandfather, you need to listen. And as you listen to that spirit tell you to go forward, you will find another world and another way. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share these thoughts with you.
Thank you so much. We want to go ahead and open it up for question and answer. So please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat and I will gladly ask it for you.
Hi, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I have a question. As a big idol yourself, who would you say is your biggest inspiration?
Easily, I think you probably can guess, my grandmother. I was very fortunate. I lived with my parents had what I would call a troubled marriage, and that would be just the nicest way of putting it. And I went to live with my grandmother because the marriage became more than I can handle. And then I realized it's one of those things you have to think through. And I realized, well, their marriage had nothing to do with me. Their marriage had something to do with them. And if they were happy with it, then I should be happy with it. But since I wasn't happy being apart, I should leave. And so I went to my grandmother. And I had to ask her, she's wonderful, grandmother, a wonderful woman. And I asked her, I was there for about a month during the summer. And I said, is it okay if I stay? May I stay with you? And grandmother was a woman. Women do this all the time. Grandmother, my grandfather's name is John Brown. She said, well, I have to talk to John Brown. Well, I found out later as I grew older, oh, she didn't have to ask John Brown anything. She had made up her mind. She already knew that I was going to stay. She knew that I had to go. And then she said, well, John Brown and I will be happy for you to stay, which is wonderful. My grandmother's been my biggest inspiration. I was laughing because I don't know if you read a magazine called Bon Appetit. And Bon Appetit does a lot with food, of course it does. But they featured, because it was her birthday this month, they featured a woman named Edna Lewis, who is a wonderful, wonderful woman. And grandmother was a wonderful cook. And I mentioned that Edna Lewis was the next best cook. My grandmother's the best cook, the next best. But what both grandmother, and that's why I'm telling you this, and Miss Lewis could do was make biscuits. And you know, after all of these years, I still can't cut biscuits. Because grandmother had a can. It was just an old can. And it had been washed and cleaned. And that's what she cut her biscuits with, because she didn't have other tools. But Miss Lewis could cut biscuits. And I don't know what it is about me. I think that I start crying or something, too much water, and I don't know. I can't make biscuits, but I can cook, and I do cook a lot of my grandmother's meals, and I am a very good cook, by the way. So other than if you didn't want biscuits, you know, you should, my grandmother. That's the truth.
Miss Nikki, now a lot of people don't recall, or they may not know, that you are a foodie, and you mentioned, of course, the magazine. And so one of the times I heard you before, you talked about one of your favorite things you would like to do would be to challenge Bobby Flay. So let's talk about that.
Of all, I would love to challenge Bobby Flay, because I really think Flay's a good cook, but I just really think that I could beat him. And I've noticed that he only has other chefs. I'm not a chef. I am a Southern cook, which is really different, because Southern cooks cook whatever is around. That's what we do, a whole different thing. We just keep looking what's in there. You always, every kitchen, Southern kitchen is going to have garlic. Of course, you have your garlic is going to hang there. And usually there's a chicken in the backyard. Grandmother, you know, would go out and wring its neck. And I used to think that was sad, so I wouldn't go out and wring its neck, but I did learn how to pluck it. But I would love to have a challenge of Bobby Flay. And I think that he ought to have to answer to a poet, don't you? I think that would be just so much fun, because he's a chef. So he's like 1/4 of this, and you know, a half a cup of that, and half an hour on this and stuff. That's not the way I cook. You know, you throw a half a stick of butter in the skillet. You've already plucked the chicken. You put some little salt and pepper on it. Lightly flour it. There's too much. One of the things that's happened with, as you know, with fried chicken is they put too much flour on it. They make batter, and chicken was not meant to be battered. It was just meant to be lightly floured. You throw it in the skillet. I'm a song or two, but I would love. I still would. I enjoy Bobby Flay and what he does, and I think things like that. You know, I don't want a restaurant or anything like that, but I think Bobby Flay ought to have to answer to a poet.
I would agree with that. Hey, how about, is there a poem that you have laying around there pretty handy? We just love to be able to hear you share a poem with us tonight.
I would love to. I was talking about not so many, but so many things that are going on right now that I just wanted to mention to your youngsters that they do. I was talking about, and I see right there behind Sharon, there's a picture of Sojourner Truth. And I think that's wonderful. And of course, we all know Harriet Beecher Stowe. We all know, we know the people who left, the people who, I was talking about where Appalachia fit in that, the people who left slavery. I think that that's good. I have no problem. Where would we be without Frederick Douglass? Where would we be without the people to speak up? But I wrote a poem on the 100th anniversary of the 13th Amendment. And it says, but some of us stayed. And I think we have to give credit to the people in Mississippi and in Alabama and Georgia who stayed to build communities, to build a life. And people like me, I went to Fisk University in Nashville, that Florida A&M, there are people that built these things. And I wanted to write something for them, but some of us stayed. We forget the strength of those who stayed behind. We sometimes don't recognize what it took to decide to build a church, a school, a store to sell the yams we picked from the ground, the tomatoes we carefully watched turn red on the vines, to seek the okra pods as well as to pick our own cotton. We took pride in our work and lovingly encouraged our daughters to dream. We sent them, our daughters, to school then, to college, and they've stayed to help others. 100 years is not so long when we plant love with patience, when we find that song that gives us the strength to go on. And I like that because if some of us hadn't stayed, it would be a different story. But if you don't mind, Tommy, I mentioned being rain, and if anything else, my new books make me rain. But if I couldn't be a woman, I'd be rain. And this is just a love poem because all poets are always in love. That's what we do. We don't have anything else to do. We either cook or fall in love. Make me rain. Turn me into a snowflake. Let me rest on your tongue. Make me a piece of ice so I can cool you. Let me be the cloud that embraces you, or the quilt that gets you dry. Snuggle close. Listen to me sing on the windowsill. Make me rain on you. I really, well, you know, you have to fall in love. It's a good thing. It's good for your health. It is.
That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Miss Giovanni, I don't know if Dr. Nicole Druitt is on here, but we have something here in Emory and Henry that is with Appalachian poetry. Nicole, are you on tonight?
Hey Sharon, I'm here. You can probably hear my daughter in the background though, so I've been on mute because she's in here with me in the playroom watching some cartoons.
I was wondering if you could just tell Miss Giovanni a little bit about what we do, and then see if she might one day want to do it with us.
Well, sure. So we have a literary festival in the fall. You might be familiar with it. You may have met John Lang at some point, who was my predecessor in the position, but we honor a living Appalachian writer every fall, usually in the beginning of November. And we have a 2-day conference event where we bring in scholars and talk about, you know, the author's life and work and commitment to Appalachia. And so maybe you and I should have a conversation.
Not a problem. I do. And one of my favorite Appalachian writers is Ron Rash. I'm sure you've had Ron as a part of that.
Yes, we have. We have had Ron as, a part of that.
Yeah, Ron is the nicest guy. He's been up here to Virginia Tech for my students also. So I just love what he does. I think he's an incredibly brilliant writer, actually. And I love the fact that he is writing about Appalachia because we don't have enough people writing about our lives as they are, as what we really lived, as how it works. And I think that that's when I mentioned Ron because this is someone I know and whose work I admire. But more and more Appalachian writing is coming out. And Tommy, more and more Appalachian cooking is going to come out. And I mentioned Edna Lewis because she is the one who opened the door to Black cooking, to Southern cooking, to the culinary arts, to being proud of what we eat, what's on our table. And I think that right now, the Appalachian community has not taken that up. There's no Appalachian cookbook, which there should be. I cook Southern. As I said, I'm a Southern cook. But I know that there are people. I have students whose grandparents, you know, they fry fish a certain way. They do, and I'll be glad that when Appalachia begins to claim some of these arts that they bring to America, I really will. But thank you. Yeah, give a holler.
And I wanted to just kind of lift up, Appalachia or Black Appalachian, however it is. Where do you see that role? I mean, has it been dumbed down? Is it still alive? Is it vibrant from a literary perspective? What would you speak to that?
I think that if I can pronounce it, I'm as bad as you are. If Black, I have a T-shirt. I should have put it on. If Black Appalachians continue with our neighbors, we will continue to learn more about the importance of Appalachia. And the one thing that everybody should, and I'm sure you all do know, is that West Virginia was going to be called Kanawha. And that's because of the river. So we need to talk about what those rivers do. Now, of course, Virginia didn't want it to be called Kanawha because nobody wanted to admit that they were wrong. So it ended up being West Virginia. But there are things that need to be, that will grow, because it all is little. But I have to say, or don't, but the one thing that I really miss in America is the draft. And I didn't like it. I think that it was Reagan that took the draft away. I could be wrong about that now. But I liked the draft because everybody who lives in a nation, is two things you ought to do. You ought to pay your taxes, and we ought to be proud. I am very proud to pay my taxes because at one point I was counted as a tax. I'm very proud. And I'm glad to see that the IRS has finally given people a little more time into May to do this. And the other thing is to serve their country. And when we had the draft, we got to know each other better. The music was different. And you all, the three of you sitting here with me, know how the music has changed. Because in our day, the music was beginning to sound more and more. You know, think of the Everly Brothers had a hit. I've been cheated, been mistreated. When will I be loved? They had a hit on the Black radio stations because we listened to each other's music. And that was important. And now that we don't have a draft, we have managed to separate people from each other. We've managed to keep people from knowing and appreciating what each other brings. I would bring back, if I were president, and I laughed at my dean the other day. I said, well, you're lucky to my dean that I'm not running for president. She said, why? I said, because if I won, the first thing I would do is outlaw golf. I sincerely hate golf. I hate the idea of it. You run all the little animals out so that you can sit there and lie about how you hit them. Get rid of it. Golf would be gone. And the second thing I would do is bring back the draft, no matter what, because everybody has something to give. The deaf, the dumb, the blind, it doesn't matter. Everybody has something to give. And if we can't talk to that person, if they are the deaf, then somebody will have to learn to do hand so that they can talk to them. So that gives us another responsibility. That gives us somebody else another opportunity to learn something. We know if you are blind, then we know somebody's going to have to learn how to talk to you as you are blind. If we had a draft and everybody was drafted, just 2 years, it won't take that long, we would get to know each other. We all, even now, we all eat Chinese, or what is called Chinese food. We don't really know what it is, but we do know that we eat it. And it's very strange that everybody's upset with what is called the Asian community, and yet we eat their food. I asked my students at the beginning of the school year, how many of you have ever had Chinese food? And they all raised their hands. We all had Chinese. I said, how many of you speak Chinese? And I only had one student who could speak Chinese. And you know that that's something, again, that we need to learn. We need to learn not only how to speak it, but how to eat with chopsticks, because we are asking the Chinese to eat with forks. There's some things that we need to come together to learn how to do. And by the time we learn that, we won't have time for these wars that we're having. We won't have time for these fears of each other. We'll be learning something. We'll be doing something together.
Carly, I want to ask our students, encourage our students that are on the call to ask some questions. So let's make sure, students, if you're listening and you brought a question to the table, now's the time to ask it. So please do.
Your students are as bad as mine. No, it's the truth. I go into class and say, didn't everybody understood the assignment? It was, they won't say a word, but no, they are, students tend to like, I'm not gonna, what if I ask the wrong question? And what you're trying to teach them, I am a big jazz fan. I love spirituals, but I'm a big jazz fan. And I've gotten my students now pretty much into Thelonious Monk. And you remember Thelonious, for those of you who are jazz fans, Thelonious played a heck of a fine piano. And he was doing an interview, and someone said to him, the guy who was interviewing him, said, you know, Mr. Monk, you play these, but these are the wrong notes. When you're playing, you know, Mysterioso or something, you're playing, you know, you play the wrong notes. And Monk just looked up at him and said, the piano ain't got no wrong notes. And went back to doing, I've always loved Monk for that. And I say to my students, it's the same thing with poetry, because I teach poetry. There are no wrong words in poetry. There are no wrong questions. They're just those that haven't gotten put in the way that we would like to have them put. And that's why when you read a poem in my class, there's no such thing as the wrong poem. There's only like, what if you put this word there? Or what if you took this word out? And so we're just trying to look at how to improve it. And I think that we have a generation right now, in all fairness to all of us, I think we have a generation that's afraid of making a mistake. And you can't be. If you are alive, you will make a mistake. Hopefully, the mistake is not that you drove while you were drinking, or you know, because you don't want to kill somebody. Hopefully, it's not that somebody's trying to pledge your fraternity and you gave him alcohol and he dropped dead. Hope not. But you're going to make some other mistake. You're going to fall in love with the wrong person. You're going to take physics and you're not going to get the answer that the physics need. Things like that. And you're going to learn from that, and you're going to go forward. Because as I said earlier, you know, we were talking earlier, because you cannot be afraid. And the one thing that you can say to yourself as Black people and as Appalachians is that I'm an Appalachian. I'm not afraid. I'm an American. I'm not afraid, because there's no cowardness in us, and we can't let people make cowards out of us because they have ambitions, because they want something from us. We have to remain who we are.
We did have a couple of things in the chat that I saw pop up. Someone asked, who is your favorite poet as a poet?
I think probably my favorite poet is going to be someplace between Gwendolyn Brooks, whose work I love. And she was a wonderful poet. But we can roll it back to, of course, I grew up in Cincinnati. I was born in Knoxville. I grew up in Cincinnati, went back to Knoxville. And of course, Paul Laurence Dunbar, who everybody loves. And Dunbar was right there from Dayton. And Dunbar, I think, was the first person to show all of us that you can earn a living. Not that everything is about earning a living, but that you can earn a living with your poetry. And Dunbar ended up being able to buy his home for himself and his family. And then on the lot next door, as it would be, he bought a home for his mother. And of course, it was Paul Laurence Dunbar who said, I know why the cage bird sings, ah, me. And of course, Maya is going to pick that up, and that's going to help keep it alive. And so we have poets who are keeping a number of things. I recently talked to the daughter, who is of a wonderful poet who we don't know enough of. Her name is Margaret Walker. And Margaret Walker wrote a really beautiful poem for my people. And it's an incredible, beautiful poem. So it's hard to say who you like, because there's so many that you do. And then there's so many young poets coming up that Jericho, I'm so proud of Jericho Brown, who won the Pulitzer this year. And I've seen some of my student, and I'm so proud of him, Kwame Alexander, who won the Caldecott, and who is one of the great YA, young Americans, YA, young adults. He's one of the young writers. I love the work of Renee Watson. So it's a lot of work out there. You just if I had my way, I'd probably just prop my feet up and get a glass of champagne and read till my eyes fall out.
That's wonderful. Someone else sent me a question that said, what is one word that you want women everywhere to learn, manifest, and embody?
No. No, it's a good word. No. In all fairness to everybody, you have to learn to say no, because you end up, and I don't, I say yes a lot, but at some point you have to take some time for yourself. So I don't know if that would be one word. But you have to take some time for yourself. So if you learn no, then you will take that time that says, well, now I'm going to go sit in the tub, or now I'm going to go, cook for myself. Now I'm going to do something. So I think no is I think yes is very important. I have a foundation here at Virginia Tech with my dear friend Virginia Fowler. We founded a foundation. It's called The Answer is Yes, and yes is very important. But right now, and I'm just at that age. I'm 77, so things move along as you do that. And I think that no, you have to find some time for yourself, for the young people. This was a young person who asked that question. This was not a 60 or 70-year-old person. This was a young person. And so you're going to have to learn to say no.
I had a question come to me as well. It says, I am reading The Prosaic Soul right now, and one of my favorite parts is learning about your life and your devotion to your sister and your feisty fighting ways as a child. Can you share your favorite memory with us of being young?
That would take about 500 years, and you're not going to let me do that. I was a baby sister, and I think all baby sisters, one, we adore our big sisters. I only had one big sister. And my big sister, though, was everything you'd want a big sister to be. She had dimples, which I've always thought, oh man, why couldn't I have had dimples? And she could sing, and she could dance, and she could play the piano. And all I had I watched, and I had words, and I was always, and I still am, I guess, on the feisty side. So when things happened that I didn't like, I would fight about it. Gary wouldn't know, her name was Gary Ann. Gary would never do that. She was a lady. And so she would always deal with it, like, this is the way it is, and it shouldn't be that way. But I was like, I'm not allowed to say the word. I mean, you stop this SH, and I'd hit you, it didn't matter. Most of the time I get beaten up, but it didn't matter. You had to fight back. It didn't matter. You have to fight.
Ms. Giovanni, somebody asked me, they were reminiscing about Nikki the Revolutionary, and they wanted to know, is she still there? Nikki the Revolutionary.
Well, I think that I have a lot of respect for the next generation. This gives me a long answer. I don't mean to. I think that my generation has to respect and get out of the way of the next generation. And the easiest thing to remember, or you must remember, and I was a history major and I love history, is that the NAACP, for example, the NAACP thought that Martin Luther King was wrong to have these marches. If you remember, it was that's the wrong way to go about it. What you need is to do the law. Martin Luther King Jr. thought that when SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, came out, and that's my generation, we were a little more feisty, thought, well, that's not the way to do it. You have to remember that we love everybody and Jesus loved everybody. And then when as we were going forward, I guess, the Panthers came along. And if you don't remember anything at all about the Panthers, you have to remember that day that they stood in Sacramento with rifles on their shoulders. And so everybody, not everybody, but some people were upset about why are they doing that. And so now we have, of course, and I'm a big fan, Black Lives Matter. I think that they're wonderful women. I've mentioned them earlier. But I think that the current generation, the older generation, has a hard time dealing with the younger generation. I think that I do what I should do, some of which could be known and some of which should not be. But nonetheless, it's nobody's business. You have to be careful what you tell people. But I have a lot of respect for what the next generation is doing. So you'll never see me, for example, saying anything negative because I don't believe it on Black Lives Matter. And if I am fortunate enough to live another 10 or 20 years, there'll be something else. And I'll be sitting in some rocking chair someplace saying, oh, it's really wonderful. Because I think that the older generation has to learn that there's a limit. And one of the things that John Lewis and I graduated at the same time together at Fisk University. And one of the things that John knew that Martin never did was that SNCC had done its work. And so he ran for a representative, if you recall. And John was the representative. And actually, as they pointed out, he was actually the conscience of Congress. It was a shame, it was sad, not a shame, because he had a cancer and it's gonna kill him. But it was sad to lose John, because I think John took the next best step. He recognized, I have done what I should do as a member of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Now I should either get out of the way or move on. And what he did was he ran for office. And I think that was the right thing to do. And he took the knowledge and took it forward. And I think that's what, I don't know when anybody, I saw Don Lemon, and it made me incredibly angry when he was saying, as Black Lives Matter was beginning to march a couple of years ago now, and he was saying, well, where are the stars? Well, the stars were in the street, Don. They were the stars. What you're looking for, you want to know something that is wrong. You want to know where are the people that you think of as stars. But the young women were in the street. The people that followed them were in the street. The rest of us should be out of the way. Otherwise, we become the thought. Everybody is asking us, what do we think? And it's not about what we think. The people are saying what they think. And our job is to support the people.
We had a question that popped up in the box here. How do you think we can end racism as a nation and individually? I guess that's the $1 million question, right?
Well, I think individually it's very easy, because you just have to check yourself. Because all of us, people always think that Black people are running around loving white people, and it's not true. We check ourselves. We don't want to always be calling you a name or always be calling you something. And if you watched Harry and Meghan, and you watched, speaking of white people, you watched Harry accuse, and he said it wasn't his grandmother, but it had to be, because nobody else cares about anybody else in that family, of being a racist. So you know that racism isn't just what Black people think about white people, or white people think about Black people. It's also about who can use something. And we know we have to be very careful about what is being used and how it's being used. And I think that for the nation, we have to make sure that our basic things, it's just so basic, that our basic things are met. We want and must have health. Everybody should be healthy, because we who are not healthy are going to spread to we who are. So that's so simple. Everybody should have health care. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned, Tommy, that needs to be mentioned is that dental care is incredibly important. People forget that dental care is one of the reasons you get sick about a lot of other things. So we need dental care. It would be good to have eye care so that you can see. So when I was growing up and going to school, we had, for example, the eye doctor came in the eye trailer and, looked at us. They did our ears to check our ears and stuff. And that was good. And it didn't hurt anybody to have that happen. And we have to look at it that way. And you say, well, what's that got to do with racism? I don't know, but I know that it's important that people stay well. I would also really recommend, because I'm a dog person, but I would recommend, if you can, a dog, because dogs teach you to love. Dogs are nice. I'm surprised you haven't heard mine. I've been trying to teach her, when she sees the screen go off, don't bark, because she's famous for coming. She doesn't like for me to talk to other people. So I'm trying to work on that. But you need something to love. And one of the things that you can love is a dog. So we know we have a lot of dogs in shelters, but we also know that a lot of children need love. And it's okay for us, if we're going to shelter the dog, if we're going to rescue the dog, then it'd be a good idea to rescue some of these kids too. We have to work on deciding we do not want to be fools. I don't know if you have to say that to yourself every day. It helps. No, it really does. Because you see some people, and they wake up in the morning thinking that they are all right, but they're not. They're fools. And so you want to just wake up every morning, look in that mirror and say, I am not a fool. And then you need to smile at somebody. It'll make you feel better and it'll make them. And you can, first it'll make you feel strange because you're not used to smiling at anybody, especially anybody that's not your color or something. But then you'll get into the habit. Good morning, hey, how you doing? And pretty soon it begins to work. You feel better. Starbucks has done so much for America, in all fairness to Starbucks, because they teach those people, hi, this is Megan, I'm from Starbucks, how can I help you today? And they sound so cheerful, you're like, damn, that's why I'm going to Starbucks. You're spending $6 every day that you don't have, but you go because somebody is so glad to see you. But that was a TV show, wasn't it? You want to go where everybody knows your name. Yeah, and so we need to work on that. And we don't want to hear rudeness on our college campuses. We don't want to hear people calling each other names and stuff. So we work on, I don't know that that'll get rid of racism, but it'll make the world that we are in a little more comfortable.
I have a question. I'm not a student, but I have a question. I know the anniversary of the shooting on campus at Virginia Tech is coming up next month. How is the atmosphere there concerning that? Has everyone settled down, or are they still celebrating that, or what?
You mean the tragedy?
Yes.
A celebration would not be the word. We acknowledge it because 32 lives were lost. And we run 3.2 miles, as you know. I don't, because I couldn't run 3.2 miles, but the youngsters do. The youngsters on our campus now were, for the most part, not on campus when the tragedy occurred, but they acknowledge it because they're human beings and they recognize what a terrible thing it must be for somebody just to come in and shoot that many people for no particular reason. But I don't think that Tech will ever forget, nor do I think we want to. I was shocked that Donald Trump refused to go to the unknown soldiers. I was just shocked that the people who have sacrificed or who have lost their lives, he couldn't walk over and lay a wreath. I just couldn't get over that. Somebody said he said it was his hair, but he bought that hair, he'd buy more. I just didn't understand any of that. And I think the Tech will always recognize and remember those lives lost. And it's a day of sadness. And I'm not correcting you because I don't like to correct people because I don't like to be corrected. But it's not celebrating. It's a day of duty and remembrance.
I didn't mean celebrate as in have a party or whatever. I mean celebrate their lives. I'm not talking about have a celebration, but celebrate them. That's what I was referring to.
Okay.
And
well,
that's okay if you correct me. You are older than I am, after all.
No, it's fine. We have different people and their relatives and their friends have done different things. They have little cards. And we pay, speaking of, I'm talking about Starbucks, pretty soon they're gonna have to pay me to say, but they have cards. And so sometimes when you're in Starbucks getting your coffee, the person in front of you will pass the card and then it's a pay it forward. And so when you get there and you get ready to pay for your coffee, they say, no, it's paid forward. And so when you're there, not the next time necessarily, but at some point, you pay it forward. You want people to know we remember also, and you pass the card for the people you know. And I think that's wonderful. I think that, again, we have to remember the people, and we do it by not only keeping their names, well, we do it in the Black community too, say her name. And I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta. If I had known this would come up, I would bring it. Our sorority has made it's like that. And in the bottom, that's our symbol. In the bottom, it has all of the names of the women so far who have been murdered by the police. It's beautiful. I keep it right there where I can see it when I get in. I don't have actually a garage like that, but I keep it where when I walk out, that's what I see. And it says, say her name. And I think that's wonderful too, because we have to remember and we have to let people know that we remember.
Ms. Giovanni, we're getting like mega questions, and Carly just asked me, how long would you go? And and we want to be mindful of your time, but I know there are some people that have put questions in, and oftentimes we have something called inclusive or intentional dialogue. And after these kinds of events, when everyone can't get their question asked, we will come back and talk about it at a later point. And we're not asking you to come back, although we'd love for you to come back and talk about some of the questions at a later time. But we do want to be mindful of that. But there are a couple. So if you tell us like you'll take 2 more, then we'll take 2 more and we'll stop or something like that, because we want to honor and respect it. I have a million questions to ask you that I'm not going to get to ask. Like I was thinking about, there are a lot of people here from Knoxville, Tennessee. And I remember when I saw you in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you did your poem, I think it was called Knoxville, Tennessee. And
Yes, it is.
like, yeah, it just blew me away. So there are quite a few people here from Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm giving a shout out to the Knoxville, Tennessee people. Your homies are here. But so those are some things I wanted to know, like, is there a poem that's about Appalachia that you have? That's just, you know.
I have a poem. I'm sorry to say, have it in front of me, and it's called When God Made Mountains.
I've
And
heard.
I love that poem. I was in my long writing poem, but when God made mountains, he's going to make Black people who are enslaved to run, but he's going to make white people who are in the mountains to welcome them. And so I really like that. And it's a long poem, but I enjoy that particular poem because we follow all of what everybody is trying to do. Everybody is doing their share, and I love that. But speaking of Knoxville, we just lost our friend, Frankie Lennon, who was Coach Lennon's daughter, who was a good friend of ours. She passed a couple of months ago now. And one of our great civil rights people was our friend, and our we loved him so much. Avon, there's a lovely photograph, by the way. Finish your sentence, Nikki. Avon Rollins. And Avon, there's a photograph of Avon because he was with Nina Simone and they were holding hands as they had crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And that was wonderful. Avon has passed too. He had a cancer. He has passed also. But he was also the first Black mayor of Knoxville. And I think that's wonderful. Well, Avon was wonderful, was a wonderful guy. And we now have Beck Cultural Center, which is collecting and doing, I think, a wonderful job with the history. But there's a lot of good history, and there's a lot, as I started this conversation, there's a lot more to go. There's a lot more to be said about Appalachia, particularly if you look at Tennessee. You know, Memphis didn't really belong to us. We could give Memphis away and nobody would miss it. And Memphis is Mississippi and we don't care. And Nashville is about money. And you know that, Nashville, that's all Nashville cares about, is how they're gonna make money. And it's only Knoxville that saved Tennessee from being a fool. It was Knoxville that reached out and said, we have to do the right thing here. And so it's very, I'm very proud to be a part of that community.
Well, Carly, if you would, if Ms. Giovanni will take 2 more, if you'll sift through there and ask 2.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll keep you.
We'll keep you at 9 o'clock, so I'm good until 9. And Gregory has to fit if I eat later than that because I've had a lung cancer and it messes with your sleep and stuff. So that's what he bitches about. And if he wasn't cute, I wouldn't listen to him, but he is cute. So I try to do what he asks.
Well, we have 2 that are pretty good questions. So the first one is, what are your thoughts on the efforts to restrict voting rights in light of the high voter turnout in Georgia and other states this year?
But you see, that's just cowardness. I mean, we're back to that. It's just cowardness. Why are you afraid of people raising their voices? What is there to be afraid of? Well, you're afraid that, as somebody said, well, you're going to lose your minority or majority, whatever you think you have, but you are anyway. It's time to peacefully begin transferring power and finding a way to share some of what you know and to learn some of what others know. I was very proud as the the nation was very proud of Stacia Abrams and the organization that she did in Georgia, and very, very proud that we have 2 senators because of her work. But this idea that we're going to stop you from voting because we are scared that you won't vote for us, then voting is meaningless. And I don't think voting is meaningless, because we have seen people, I loved it, I don't know if you remember the movie, because we just lost Cecily Tyson. And Cecily's a brilliant actress. But it's a lot that made that movie. She was, one of the movies that she was in was the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And she's 100 years old. And she was fighting about her right to have a drink of water. And she walks, and the sheriff is standing there, but she finally is able, and Cecily just did a great job to walk and take a drink from that. And that drink from that fountain is the same thing as our vote. We cannot be discouraged from voting, because our people, and our friends have always wanted us to vote. The Asian community, the Latin community, the Black community, our friends in the white community, all want their voices heard. And we have to do everything in our power to keep that, to let everybody know. And I would say that to your students, as I said to mine. I started most of this year with, are you registered? And I don't care, it was not my business, and I didn't ask, nor did I discuss who you might vote for. It's not what we're here for. It's just that you must let your voice be heard. You may not be silenced. You may not be discouraged. You may not say, oh, it doesn't matter what I do, because people died for you to do something. Go in and write your grandmother's name in. Go in and write the devil's name in. I don't care what you do, but you put that in. I will always vote because of a woman named Fannie Lou Hamer. And Mrs. Hamer, in 1964, organized Mississippi and gathered together nickels, dimes, and quarters to rent a bus to take her people to Atlantic City for the Democratic Convention. And she testified that they should be the people seated. Lyndon Johnson, who was not perhaps a bad guy, said to her finally, why don't we give you 2 seats and we'll give them the other and we'll work it out. And speaking of statements that are wonderful, Mrs. Hamer looked up, Lyndon was tall, looked up at Mr. Johnson, who was president of the United States, and said, we didn't come here for no 2 seats. And turned around and walked back and got on her bus. And they were back, when they got back in Mississippi, the bus was stopped by the sheriff, by cowardly white men who pulled her off the bus and beat her, and had Black men to beat her and beat her. And I said, as long as there's any part of me that's alive, and if I'm not mistaken, the last thing that dies in your body is your liver. So if there is an election, somebody take my liver to the polls, because I will always vote.
I love that. The last question comes from a student who wants to know, what would your advice be for aspiring poets?
Well, really, in all fairness, and I don't want to sound, like I don't care or something, but my advice is to read. Most people don't read enough, which means that they're not stupid, but they're not smart either. They just been on the dumb side. So they're trying to write poetry and they don't know what to write about. So they say, I have a block. I have a writer's block. No, you don't. You don't know what to write about. You must read. I'm a big fan of libraries, and so I'm going to suggest that. And they're not nearly enough, of course, as you know. Bookstores, we're losing bookstores all over the place, but libraries or even the bookstore, you must read, and you will read those things that interest you. You don't have to read what interests me or anything. What interests you, learn something about that. feel comfortable to learn something about that. And then to go, oh, I wonder if, because once you take that step, you're going to be a writer because your imagination is going to kick in. But the most important thing is to read. You just can't get around that. You have to read.
I'm going to ask, as Carly tells us how we're going to end this, I would like to ask Ms. Giovanni if you would end by reading something for us, or saying or reciting something for us. Your choice as a parting gift for us tonight, as Carly tells about us getting ready to go home. Carly?
Yes.
Or
Okay.
not the right.
I don't recite the rappers recite. I have to pull things out because I always leave my mind open. But let me read one of my favorite poems called Ego Tripping.
Oh, take me, take me, take me, take me, take me. Take me.
I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light. I am bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert. With a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes, I crossed it in 2 hours. I'm a gazelle, so swift, you can't catch me. For a birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son, Hannibal, an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. I stood proudly at the helm. My son Noah built Newark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intone my loving name, all praises, all praises. I am the one who would save. I sowed diamonds in my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thin and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal. I cannot be comprehended except by my permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky.